everyone, how are you guys? Welcome back to another week on the Brushed by Brandy YouTube channel. My name is Brandy and I'm the owner and artisan behind Brushed by Brandy. And this is kind of an exciting week because we are back here. I'm back making new videos, new tutorials after a little break on my channel. A big change in my business just occurred. And I'm no longer going to be using the paint brand that I was using before because of some business differences. And so we are going to be exploring a whole bunch of new products here on the Brushed by Brandy YouTube channel. So this means tutorials with things that you've never seen me use before are going to be coming your way. And this week is the first one out the door. It's going to be with this piece right behind me. The colors on it are stunning. A few of the products that we're going to be using are, we are using Owl Paint. And I love Owl. There's a whole bunch of things about this paint that I really love. I feel like it's great for getting artistic finishes. It also does smooth, easy blending. It's a really highly pigmented, very high quality paint. And so I really enjoyed using this week. We brought out all of their blues, which are super rich and luxurious. So we used Owl. I combined that with some accents in Daydream Apothecary neon paints. And the neons are just the perfect accents. If you don't want to use them on the entire piece, you can use them for just pops of color. And these two combined beautifully to give me an amazing look. So I'm excited to share Daydream Apothecary and Owl Paint with you guys this week. And then of course we are using some Would You Bend moldings, and these brought my piece to life. An otherwise plain front, I was able to add some really cool accents and give it some interest using my Would You Bend moldings. So I hope you guys enjoy this video. Stick around. We're going to talk a lot about some of the pluses of using different paints, differences between every brand. I always believe that every brand brings its own strengths to the table. No two are ever created the same. And we're going to see some things this week that I don't think you guys have seen before. So stick around. Let's go ahead and get started. Here's where I started on this piece. I actually picked this one up as part of a set. It's incredibly well-made furniture, but the flat fronts on it were super boring. They definitely needed some interest. This is the high boy dresser that I already did. You'll find this video already on my channel. So right away, I knew that I needed some ways that I could spice up the flat fronts of this furniture piece, and I chose to do that first using Would You Bend moldings. Would You Bend moldings start off rigid, but when you heat them, they actually turn into a really pliable material, and you can apply them to the front of any piece of furniture. So I started out with this rope molding that had a really pretty detail on it, and I'm going to go ahead and apply it around the edges of all 4 of the drawers. But I want to make sure that I apply it along the edges, and I'm going to picture frame the corners so they have a nice 45-degree angle and meet up nicely and look like a professionally done corner. I start out by heating up my rope molding, and then I'm going to use a little bit of Titebond Quick and Thick adhesive, and I'm going to apply it to the edge of each side of my drawer. Once I've got the molding laid onto my drawer front where I want it to be applied, I go ahead and heat it again to soften the molding, and then I'm going to take a razor knife and I'm going to cut right onto the corners where they overlap. This is going to create a perfect 45-degree angle on both sides where they meet up, and it's going to give me those nice picture frame corners. I'm just using baby wipes to wipe away any excess adhesive. I'm going to work my way around all 4 sides of my drawer, and I just work one corner at a time. I overlap those corners going straight, and then when I cut them both at a 45-degree angle at the same time, they're both going to match up perfectly. Let's go ahead and finish framing out this drawer. With my moldings attached all the way around, I'm going to go ahead and heat it all one more time just to make sure I get it perfectly flat and lined up with the edges of my drawers nice and straight, and then clean up any excess glue using my baby wipes. So now that I've added a little bit of interest to my drawer faces using the rope molding, I know that I also want to add some interest to the face of my furniture piece. So I'm going to use this medallion and place it right across this center molding. This medallion applies the same way. I'm going to heat it lightly with my heat gun, and then I apply a little bit of Titebond Quick and Thick to the back and attach it to my piece, clean up any excess glue. I'm going to heat it one more time and just make sure it seats perfectly into my piece. These moldings are amazing because once they're on and they're attached really nicely, you cannot tell that these are not original to the furniture piece. The last detail that I want to add to this is kind of a cascade of flower moldings that are going to drip down the front of this piece. So I chose a bunch of different designs of flowers, also from Wood U Bend. I heated them each up, and I'm going to go ahead and place them in a custom design that cascades across the front of my furniture piece. I add a little bit of glue to the back of my flowers, and then I play with the placement a little bit. Sometimes I don't get it right at first, and so I just move them around. I can wipe the glue off anywhere that I get any excess on until I figure out the correct placement that I like the best. I really loved on this one combining a bunch of different designs of the Wood U Bend flowers, so I took probably 3 or 4 different flowers and I just mixed and matched them any way that I liked until I had a pattern that really worked for this piece. I even had a few random broken petals from a piece of a flower, and so I took those and I used those as fillers around the edges of my other flowers. There is no right or wrong way to apply these, so you really get to play with whatever kind of design you want. Once I heat the flowers, they actually conform to the rope molding that I added along the edges of my drawer, so it looks really custom, like these always belong to this piece. This is a vanity, and I always feel like vanities are meant to be very feminine. I want to do kind of an edgier design on this one, but I feel like the flowers are really going to set it off. I do want to add that the front of this piece had a really slick surface, and so I did go ahead and make sure I scuff sanded the entire body, so you can see a little bit of the scuffing in the finish here. Next, I'm going to go ahead and apply a base of a light gray stain blocking primer from Wise Owl. One thing that really excited me about the stain blocking primer from Wise Owl was number one, that it comes in 4 different colors. It comes in clear, in white, in gray, and in a dark gray. So it gives you a lot of options depending on what your furniture paint is going to be for what color primer to put on it. I also love that their primer is a stain blocker and a gripping primer in one. It works really great and I love how it goes on. I chose to put my primer on after I had my moldings all the way attached. There is no right or wrong way to do this. I tend to prefer it when all my paint finishes are over the top of my moldings, but you can absolutely apply the moldings on top of your paint finishes as well. The primer goes on just like a paint. I'm applying it with a brush, and this serves as a great base for my paint to go on top of, and it also makes sure that my the body of my piece will not bleed through and discolor my paint over time. I chose to do kind of an interesting finish on this piece, and that was my undercoat. I actually applied using a stippling motion. I just dabbed my brush into my paint and then dabbed it over the top of my primer, and that gave it this really light texture. I'm going to blend my paint finish over the top of it, but you can still see this little pebbly texture underneath my blended coat. Here I'm applying my second coat of paint, which is going to be a blended finish that's going to go over the top of this lightly textured base coat. I love that Wise Owl paint is so pigmented. The colors in this paint are extremely rich. I would have to say this is one of the areas where this paint really shines. One of the reasons I added a light texture to the base coat was because I really wanted to play around with the paint. I wanted to see what it does, what it did when I added a little bit of texture, how it responded to water. These are great ways that you can learn a new type of paint, and that's exactly what I was doing here. Now, I have used Wise Owl in the past, but it's been several years, and so I wanted to get reacquainted with it. By combining multiple finishes on the same piece of furniture, I can really learn what the paint is capable of. So in this case, I did my textured base coat, and then I'm going to see how it blends over the top. I also found this paint to be an excellent blender. The colors move together. They're extremely richly pigmented. They just kind of meld into each other. It was an amazing paint to blend with as well. Wise Owl paint is made right here in the US, and they really pride themselves on using the highest quality of minerals, and I think they definitely achieved that. I was really impressed just by how quality the pigments were, how rich and bright the colors were. They really are second to none. Wise Owl paint also shines in their color selection. They have beautiful colors, but they are really strong in the blues, and you know the blues are what gets my heart. So I had no shortage of choices here, and I really love this color combination. The colors that I chose for this piece are 3 shades of blue in Wise Owl: Poseidon, Inkwell, Siren Song, and then I'm also using a white called Antique Villa. I had originally thought that I wanted the legs on this piece to be a contrasting color, and so I put a coat of gray on them, but I didn't really like how it turned out, so I ended up carrying my paint finish down onto the legs of the piece as well. You usually see me blending on camera with my drawers inside the frame of my piece. I do always take these out afterwards, and I make sure that I get around the frame of the furniture piece. The reason that I blend with the drawers in is so that I get a nice, even, consistent finish over the front of the drawers, and then I just make sure I take them out and clean up around the edges. I'm using Klingon brushes also from Owl here, and I'm using one brush for each color and then a dry neutral brush that I work the colors together with. I'm just starting to get acquainted with the Klingon brushes. I don't have a huge collection of them, but so far my favorites are the flat brush, the F50, and then the large oval brush. They're nice, soft, synthetic bristle brushes. They clean extremely well. I like the nice long handles on them. They fit my hand really well, and most of all, the texture of the bristles is really perfect for blending. So now that we've got the drawer fronts all done, let's go ahead and pull those out and get around the frame of the piece. I do make sure that I blend my frame to match my drawer fronts so that when those drawers, if they set in a little bit, it looks like that frame matches perfectly with the front of the piece. The front is all done. Let's go ahead and work our way around to the sides of the piece, and I'm going to go ahead and repeat the process. I start off with my darker blue around the top, which is my inkwell, and then I'm going to go ahead and carry it into some poseidon, down to siren song, and then my white, which is antique villa at the bottom. From this angle, you can really see that lightly textured finish that I have on the base coat underneath. And I want to keep that showing through on this coat of paint that I'm adding above it. So I add a little bit of water, and I'm just going to work my colors down. I start with the inkwell at the top, going down into the poseidon, and then siren song and antique villa at the bottom. And I use a little bit of water just to keep that textured finish peeking through this coat that I'm working on now. Let's go ahead and finish up these sides, and then I'll have an entire second coat on the body of this piece. All right, my body is nice and blended, and now I have a fun little detail that I want to add around these flowers. Now here I'm going to change my mind a little bit. I'd originally thought I wanted this bright green color that I'm using to be kind of drippy, and so I'm going to apply it using a dripping method. I'm using a lot of water, and then I'm going to let it run down the front of my piece. Now once I was finished with this, I didn't really care for the look, so I ended up changing it later. That's the fun thing about paint. There's no reason you can't play around. Before I added this green, I went ahead and sealed my paint so that I could play over top of it and not have to worry about putting any paint on it. So this is fully sealed paint. I just wiped on a coat of the Owl satin varnish using a sponge. What I'm dripping over top is a bit of neon paint from Daydream Apothecary. This color is called Soulful of Sunshine. It's a little bit translucent, so I added a tiny drop of C'est La Vie from their chalk line, and that allowed it to be a little bit more opaque, and it created this beautiful neon green color. The contrast of the green up against these rich, bright blues from Wise Owl was absolutely stunning. So I know I love this color combination. It just ended up being the drippy look. I struggle with this look. I tend to like really clean, even, smooth finishes. And so when I try to do these messy, artistic things, I don't know, they just don't work for me as well as they do for some people. So I knew I needed to go back to the drawing board and rethink this. So let's put pause on the bright green and we're going to come back and revisit it later. While I rethink the neon green from Daydream Apothecary, I know that I want to go ahead and paint out these drawer boxes. So I'm just going to apply, I actually used a little bit of my gray primer, but I really liked the color, so I left it alone and I just went ahead and sealed it. I'm applying it using one of the Wise Owl premium brushes. My same neon green mixed with Daydream Apothecary is going to pop up again on the drawer side. So I mix this color again and I'm just applying it using the Victorian stencil pack from Grace on Design. I'm using a stencil brush and I'm just massaging the paint in a circular motion over the top of my stencil. I didn't use any stencil adhesive or anything, just the lightest amount of paint on my brush to make sure my stencil line came out nice and clean. The color on this is stunning. My drawer sides are done. I sealed these in a little bit of satin clear coat. So when all else fails for me, what do? I go to what I like the most, and that is a blended finish. So I'm going to take my neon green and I'm going to blend it into the blues instead of making it so drippy. This did require me to go ahead and put another coat over the front of my drawers, but I liked it so much better when I was done, so it was totally worth it. I'm using my Klingon brush and I'm applying a mix of my Daydream Apothecary paint over the top of my flowers again. And then once I've got those nice and covered, the green all dug into the depths of the flowers, I'm going to go ahead and blend it into the Wise Owl paint. I am blending two different types of paint, you guys, and it works absolutely beautiful. These types of paint are both water-based, they're both chalky style paints, and they're very friendly to each other. There are certain types of paint that don't blend very well, and for those you may just want to be cautious about mixing those with other types of paint. It might not work as well as these two did, but it doesn't mean that you can't still do it. So these two absolutely were friendly to each other. I actually loved the bright colors that I got by combining these two. The light green of the neon going into the blues of the Wise Owl was really beautiful. I'm just applying my colors back over top of where they were on my original blend, and then I'm using a clean, dry brush to work them together. I chose to leave a little bit of drippiness coming down from the flowers, but it's very purposeful. It looks a little bit cleaner than the original look did. I feel like this neon green has kind of a radioactive quality to it, and so it almost needed to have those drips of color. So I'm curious what you guys think. Do you guys like the dripping kind of messy look on this, or do you like this blended finish better? I felt like the aura around the flowers of the neon green almost gave them a soft, ethereal effect, and it was exactly what I wanted. It looks like they're glowing in the dark. This color is absolutely magical. I think if I had a black light that this piece would look absolutely amazing in a room with a black light. Now that I'm super happy with the paint finish on this, I'm going to pop those drawers back in. There's those drawer sides again. And let's go ahead and work around and do the finishing touches across the front. Next up, I'm going to take a little bit of Wise Owl wax in black, and I'm just going to take a natural bristle artist brush, and I'm going to ride that black wax into the very crevices of my furniture piece. I am going to seal over the top of this wax, and the reason I'm doing that is because I'm comfortable with it. I'm applying it just into the deep crevices of my moldings. It's very little wax. I buff away any excess, and I do this all the time, but just be cautious when you're doing this. The next thing I'm going to use is a little bit of silver gilding wax from Redesign with Prima. I'm just going to apply this with my fingers, and I'm going to ride over the top of my flower moldings and the rope detail I added to the front of the drawers. This silver is called Shiny Star, and it actually comes in a tube now. I have it in the old container, but now you'll find it in the tubes. This wax goes on extremely well. It's super soft and smooth, and you can see how it just brings those molded details to life just using the tip of my finger. All right, so here it is with all the waxes applied. This piece is done. I absolutely love it. It's gorgeous. I'm going to let those waxes set up for 24 hours on my piece. That gilding wax is going to dry nice and hard, and then I'm going to go ahead and apply a clear coat. I did end up stripping the top of this piece down to a wood stain finish. I applied a little bit of walnut stain to the top, and I think it's a really nice classic combo. So what I'm spraying here is actually the Wise Owl satin varnish, and it sprays really well. This is inside a Husky spray gun attached to a compressor, and it goes on really nicely. I found this product sprayed extremely well. I do have another video on my channel that talks about all my spray gun options. I went ahead and did 2 coats over the body of this piece and then about 4 coats over the top, and it is done. I did the mirror to match as well. I staged this one using a really simple glass vase of a bright pop of flowers, and that's all it needed. Otherwise, it stands on its own. These colors are magnificent. If you guys enjoyed this video, I hope you'll click that subscribe button. You can find a materials list along with links for everything I used in this video in the description for this post. A sincere thank you to Wise Owl Paint, Daydream Apothecary, Grace on Design, Would You Bend Moldings, and Redesign with Prima for all the materials we used in this video. As always, you can find more Brush by Brandy on Facebook, Instagram, Pinterest, YouTube, and on my website at brushbybrandy.com.